We're on.
Okay. Okay, first things first, you're going to set the clock up in a position on the floor where you want it that's relatively level. But if it's not level, that's not a problem, as long as it's close, because the legs themselves are held together by these four dowels. They're screw dowels. So to level it on here, in this case you have a carpet, so it's not an issue, but I'm going to level it anyway, just to demonstrate. All you need to do is loosen the four front ones like this, and the legs of the clock now are somewhat independent. There's some movement. Let it free fall, and then just tighten them up again.
Okay.
And that levels the clock for you, at least at this point. Okay, so the next part is to put the tabletop on. And since I have it labeled front and back, I have this thing here. It doesn't need to be labeled because this is going to be your back. This is the part where the pendulum floats through. And notice I have some tenon joints and some mortises already cut. This will free float into the legs, tight enough that you have a good joint, but loose enough that it can come off easily. And I did that for the purpose of transportation. So if you want to move it somewhere, it's relatively easy to do. So it just floats right in and drops right down on top like that. Once you have the tabletop in place, the next thing you want to do is take the weight and just get it situated and ready. And that way you don't have to be moving heavy weight with the clock in place. The next thing is to get the clock up on top of the table. Don't worry too much about where the clock resides, as long as it's in the close position. The back side here is where the pendulum is going to connect onto here. And that pendulum has to float straight down through this small opening right here. So we'll get that lined up with the pendulum once we have it attached. So the next thing is actually to put the pendulum on. So let's put the pendulum onto it. We'll hang it.
Now, how much clearance do you need in the back for the winding mechanism?
For the winding, well, actually, the winding mechanism is already designed so that the clearance is there. You don't have to worry about that. So the clearance that you're worried about is this clearance right here.
Okay.
And so
can I move that closer to the back wall?
Yes, you can.
Because at least for the temporary positioning.
Oh, I see. You're looking for clearance from the wall.
Yeah,
okay.
so that we have. I'd like to get it as close to the wall that doesn't interfere with the operation.
That's as much clearance as you need for the winder, and that is the limiting factor. So we'll move that back just a tad. How's that?
Excellent.
Okay.
And you know why I'm moving it, so
yeah,
because
keep
of
the
grandchildren and
okay.
That's a pretty nice display right there.
Yeah. I have the.
How nice this looks. This is beautiful.
It's incredible. I have the locking nut right here for the back of this. This is where you'll do all of your adjustments for this rocker arm on the escape wheel right here. So we're just going to put it on temporarily for now, just to get it in a relative position, and then we'll adjust fine-tune once we get the weights on and all that. Notice when I tightened it how it got close to the table again. So we're going to move the clock on the table back slightly, like this. And before we actually put weights on and do that, I want to just line it up. And I actually do this just by hand. I just get a sense for how close we are to either side, and then front and back I'll just adjust slightly, just to get it flush and square onto the table. And that's about it. The clock has rubberized footing, so once it's down, especially when you have the weight hanging from it, and there's about, what, 14 pounds in there? Between 14 and 18, I forget what yours is. Once you have the weight attached to it, the downward pressure of the weight on these right here will actually help stick it to the top, and it's not going to move, guaranteed. Okay, so once we have that in place, we'll adjust it once we get the weight on. We'll adjust the pendulum so that we have that rock right. One thing that most people may not realize is that when the pendulum's in place, first thing people worry about is it level? But that doesn't matter, because you readjust the pendulum to get this in the correct geometry on this, and level doesn't matter. Once it's tightened up and adjusted for the geometry here, then it just swings level to earth anyway. So it doesn't matter. Okay. This is probably about the hardest part, which I think is not very hard. There's two parts of this here. There's one wheel that fits right down the center here, and it just floats here. And it actually doesn't spin or turn at all once it's in place. That wheel, all it does is allows the wire to run from the center of the clock winding dowel down through here, through the weight, back up, around this wheel, back down to the weight, and then back up the other side. So that way I get 2 full runs of wire on one single drop of the weight.
Which gives you about how much
that will
time?
give you roughly just about 2 days of run time on one single wind.
Thank you.
Which really makes okay. This is the part where it takes two people to run it. I can do it myself, but it'd be easier if I have one other person holding this down. The note how the when I wind this, it's going to wind in that direction when I actually wind. So what I want to do is have the wire. I'm going to do it like this. I want to have the wire up and under like this for this side. So that way when it winds,
it pulls it up.
It pulls it up, and then it pulls off the right way. Okay. So that's the first part. You got to make sure it's on the right side of the drum.
Okay.
The one wire comes down on the inside, and now note that this is on an angle in here. This is forward and this is aft. So I want this wire to be on the front wheel here. The reason is if I put it on the back wheel, then it'll be cockeyed this way when it's pulling, when it's actually hanging. And I want to do is I want to make sure that these are level or flush with the face of the clock. And the way I do that is simply make sure that this wire runs through the front wheel and then up to the center wheel at the table here. I'll do that now.
Okay.
Okay, so it's pretty easy. Just take the wire and run it through underneath. Now, I don't have to keep it on the wheel right now. I just have to make sure that when I run the wire that I don't get the wires crossed up, so that way when I'm done running it, it's all twisted in here and overlapping. Okay, so I bring it back up to this center wheel. And let it hang on the center wheel like that. And then when it comes back down, I want to make sure that it's on the back wheel. So that's this one here. The other tricky part of this is, especially if you're doing it by yourself, is that you got to keep it tight, otherwise it'll come off the tracks.
I got it.
So it really is a three-handed evolution.
Yep.
Like that.
Oh, I can enlist.
Okay.
I can find help as
Greg will help.
Greg
Okay.
or Gene.
Right, and then I keep it taut, and then once again, got to make sure that all the wires are on the inside of the doweling. Otherwise, you'll find the wires hanging outside the dowel when you're winding. Pretty embarrassing.
Right.
Now, on this one here, note that the wire is coming off this way.
Yep.
So as it comes off, that means this is turning in this direction. So that means that this one has to go over top and over. So it's on the opposite side.
Yep.
Okay. So I'll put it on here, and then, now here's the trick. If you're single-handed, you want to just hold it up like this.
Yep.
That keeps everything tight and onto the wheels while you do this. You just go ahead and just wind it up like this. And as you wind, I'm letting it run out. I'm allowing it to lower back onto this wheel down here, the guide wheel. That guide wheel simply takes the weight and distributes it from the drum here and right and left nearly equal, so that way the pressure is not up or down, it's right and left, meaning it's equal pressure on both sides. And that saves for wear and tear on a wood drum. Okay, it's almost in a position where I have it just tight now. So at this point, just want to make sure that I readjust this back to the center, like that.
Eyeballing it.
Yeah, mostly. And then it's already starting to run. I haven't even adjusted it. Okay, at this point, it's a matter of just giving it a couple turns and wind it, and then we'll fine-tune the pendulum. So go ahead and wind your clock, Mike, and you should hold this in, so you don't want that gear to flip off. And there's no way you can do it wrong, because if it'll counter wind and slip in the wrong direction, so you don't break anything. You might not have enough room in here. You might have to pull it out just a tad. Okay, that's good for now. And then I'm just going to give it a nudge at it the way it is. Or in fact, I don't have to. It's already going. Okay. So let me. Okay, this is the adjustment part. In this case here, I'm just going to pull this back. Let that free fall. This is the adjustment part. Let me just show you. This is the hardest part. It's not too far off the way it is, and it might even just run this way. listen to the tick. It's coming off of here too soon, so it's going tick tock.
So it's not even.
Tick, right.
Okay.
And the key is to get an even tick and a tock. And the way you do that is simply readjust this right here. Now, as soon as I unadjust it, this here is going to fall off. Now, this is kind of by eyeball. And what I want to do is I want to try to get some equal distance between here and here onto the tooth. So I'm going to try to level it like this. Now, the hardest part here is getting this to tighten up again without undoing what you just did. So I may have to do this a few times to get it right. And I can already tell you it's too far down on this side, so I'm going to once again bring it back up. But once you get an eyeball for it, again, it's still too far down.
What does that adjust? What are you turning? What is that?
All I'm doing right here is I'm allowing this to free fall onto this,
Okay.
and then I'm tightening it. So
I
this
see.
is just a dogging screw. It's still too far down on this side here, so once again I'm lifting up on this side, and then I'm tightening the pendulum, and the pendulum is free falling straight up and down. It's still too much on this side here. Yeah, still too much, but not much, just a tad more. And it may take you a few times to get this just right. And then you may even want to just go back and readjust a little bit more later on too, just to get it perfect. But this thing you'll find is very forgiving. Doesn't require perfection. It only requires you get it in the ballpark. Very close there. You can hear the very even tick and tock. Maybe I need to bring it down just a tad on this side.
A little too much.
Yeah, what'll happen is the pendulum is, I don't have a third hand to hold on to it. And the biggest problem right now is the humidity. And until the storms and all the humidity dries up a little, you'll still have, it's going to run just a tad sluggish right now. And,
So this seasonally will change a little bit.
what happens is it'll get just a little sluggish if the humidity starts getting up 40 and 50%, and
Right.
it starts getting above that, and then it starts to actually, the wood starts to move a tad, and it'll even stop. If, for example, a storm rolls through, and it will stop. It stopped on me this week for a day, and but if it stops for one day, and that's 1 out of 365, you're doing okay.
This can just turn to the time.
Yeah, you just turn it right to the right time. And if you want to recalibrate that, let's say bring it all the way to 3 o'clock and make sure it's okay. It's not quite on 3, so you just want to lift that one up like that.
Yep, yep.
And now you're good to go again. This thing is sliding on it. Now, one thing.
I can turn it either way.
Yeah, either way. One thing about this, this here is, just make sure that that's free floating on here. If you turn this, it's slightly off in one spot. I probably have to go back in and drill it out. It'll actually wrench onto here because it's like two ovals, you know, it'll wrench on. So just make sure it's not wrenched on. And if it is, you can actually take this off. You can take this whole thing off, pull it off, and just readjust. But it shouldn't be a problem for you. Just as long as you're not, fiddling with it all the time, just leave it where it's at. You're good to go. So what time is it now? It's 4:33, and I can tell you this is still off just a tad.
Yep, because it stopped.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes. Yeah. And then you already know how to adjust it for the time. And that's just a matter of raising and lowering the pendulum.
Just loosening that.
Yeah,
and
loosen
sliding it up.
Now, cautionary, these are wood parts, so if you try to dog it like a metal part, it'll break. So just enough to hold
Snug
it
it
in
up,
place.
just snug it.
Right, right.
Not
Just
tighten
enough.
it really, just snug
Yeah.
it. Yep.
You don't need to put the grip of Superman on this thing to get it right.
Well, let me do one thing. I'm going to run upstairs. I want to take a picture of you next to my clock.
Okay.
A Kodak picture.
What I did was I put together a little coffee table book
Did you?
with all of the pictures of the build and all that.
I-
with Mike.